My life right now isn't the one I had planned on. Maybe you can say the same. Today, I'm going to share a bit about my life and my loss and how I try to acknowledge the reality of my suffering, but still focus on hope and trust in God. I'm Kendra Tierney, and this is Ascension Presents. I'm the founder and CEO of Catholic All Year, an apostolate dedicated to liturgical living in the home and keeping Catholicism weird. I'm also a mother of 10, and I'm a recent widow. I met my husband in September of 2000 at a meeting for young adult volunteers at the Catholic youth group I had attended back in high school. I was in my hometown of San Diego again after college. Jim was from Chicago originally. He was an officer at Marine Corps boot camp, so had been living in San Diego for a couple years. It was a first comes love, then comes marriage for us. We were engaged 10 weeks after we first met and married in August of 2001. The baby in the baby carriage showed up 10 months later, and again in 2004, and again in 2005. In February of 2007, Jim was diagnosed with metastatic melanoma. I found out I was expecting baby number 4 a couple days later. Jim had medications and surgeries and radiation treatments. Baby Gus was born in November. The three of us visited the Shrine of Our Lady of Lourdes in France that spring. After his course of treatments and our pilgrimage, Jim spent 10 years in remission. We had 5 more children in those 10 years. We were happy. Jim had a job he cared about. I homeschooled and liked our liturgical living in the home so much that I started Catholic All Year to tell other people about it. We bought our fixer-upper dream house and settled into life in a community we loved. In 2018, during a routine follow-up scan, it was discovered that Jim's cancer was back, or more likely, had never really been gone. He started a new treatment plan. The melanoma tumors spread to his lungs and eventually his brain. Our youngest daughter was born in 2019. When she was 3 months old, Jim started having occasional grand mal seizures. Over the next 2.5 years, Jim continued to be, as he always had been, a conscientious professional, a dedicated father, a devoted husband, a good friend, and a man of great personal faith. He died at our home on July 9th, 2022, at the age of 49, surrounded by family and friends, having received last rites and viaticum. It was a kind of happy death that Catholics pray to St. Joseph that they might get to have. My children and I have had the consolation of strong support from our family and our community, material stability, and most importantly, we've had each other. By all discernible metrics, we are doing well. But I have to admit that my life isn't what I wish it was. It isn't what I imagined it would be. My husband was a good man. Our marriage felt easy, despite the challenges we faced, and now it's gone. We thought we would grow old together, but instead I'm a single mother. Losing a husband is more than losing a person. It's also losing an imagined future and having to face decisions and hardships and circumstances that my marriage would have shielded me from. We often think of the discernment of a vocation as something that young people do once, but that's not the case. I am confident that I had a vocation to marriage and that my husband and I helped each other to grow in holiness. But marriage is only until death. My marriage ended when my husband died, but also my vocation ended. I might be called to marriage again. I might now be called to a single life, or theoretically even to religious life. Plenty of great saints have gone from marriage to religious life. So it's a whole new start, but it's not one I relish. I know a lot of you are in a situation like that. While not exactly like mine, shares some of these characteristics. You can also say, this isn't the life I imagined I'd have. Maybe you've lost a spouse or a child. Maybe you've been open to finding a spouse and haven't yet. Maybe you've been open to having children, but they haven't come. Maybe you've lost a job or material goods or loved ones. Maybe you or someone you love has been a victim of violence or injustice. Maybe you've suffered. Maybe you've watched someone you love suffer. It's easy to start thinking of ourselves as having our own little Job moment. Lord, I've loved you. I've dedicated myself to serving you. Why must you try me like this? We can look around at other people's lives or at our former lives and say, why me? And there are the comments from other people saying this is just God's plan for us, that whatever tragedy we're facing is God's will. That's not great to hear. And if you're in the habit of saying that to people in crisis, I'd suggest maybe knock it off. It's not really an accurate representation of the truth anyway. There is evil in the world and suffering and decay. There's crime and disease and disaster. These things exist not because God wills our suffering, but because God wills our freedom. If we and the people around us don't have the freedom to choose wrongly, then we don't have true freedom. Before the fall of Adam and Eve, before they used their freedom to choose to disobey God, they were never going to die. They were never going to get sick or old. But because of their sin, death entered the world, and with death, also disease and decay. In the liturgy of the Easter Vigil Mass, however, we call it a happy fault because the sin of Adam and Eve also brought Jesus and his redemption into the world. God doesn't will our suffering, but he does allow it. And moreover, Jesus, the second person of the Holy Trinity, chose to enter into suffering with us and to make it holy. God allows our suffering and our confusion and our unhappiness with our current lives. He allows it, and if we allow it, he will use it to bring us closer to him. If we can look at God as Abba, Father, and run to him in our suffering, he will console us. Honestly, that's a lot of what my time spent in adoration of the Blessed Sacrament is these days. Why, God? Make this better, God. Help me. I think that's okay. The Psalms are beautifully full of that sentiment. I think of how I feel when my children come to me with their difficulties and heartbreaks. I want that. I want them to come to me for comfort. I know that's how God sees me when I come to him. Our suffering is really a moment of fiat. Will we use what we're going through to separate ourselves from God or to grow closer to God? As I've lived longer with my current circumstances, I've been really drawn to a St. Padre Pio quote that a friend shared with me. Well, maybe it's a St. Padre Pio quote. I can't find a reliable source for it, but someone said it, and it is this: "Blessed is the crisis that made you grow, the fall that made you gaze up to heaven, the problem that made you look for God." That's what has happened for me. I have realized that for maybe the first time as an adult, my life isn't how I would have wanted it, and there's nothing I can do to fix it. There are still so many consolations and so many moments of joy. There are people I love and people who love me, but my family life is no longer a reflection of the Catholic ideal, and there's no amount of hustle or bootstrapping on my part that will ameliorate the effect of these changes in my life. All I can do is give it to God. It has inspired me to devote myself to prayer in a way that I had never managed before when things felt like they were going so swimmingly. I feel a bit like St. Peter when he says, "Lord, to whom shall we go?" Because I believe there's nowhere else I can go. I can turn to God as a comforter. I can turn to Mary and the saints and Jesus who have themselves experienced great sorrow. I know they can sympathize with me. That's what hope is in the end. It's believing that God is always good, always merciful, always faithful, that he genuinely cares about me and my piddly little tragedies and sorrows. He cares about my sorrows, and he wants me to be comforted. It's okay to grieve the life we wanted, the life we thought we'd have. It's about finding that line between sorrow, which can be holy, and despair, which can be a mortal sin. By trusting that a different life can still be good if we give it to God, we can avoid that temptation to despair. Okay, I know that's a lot. God is so good. Please keep me and my family in your prayers. If you want to know more about my apostolate of liturgical living in the home and keeping Catholicism weird, check out my book, The Catholic All Year Compendium, my show, Catholic All Year at Home on Formed, or find me at catholicallyear.com or on social media. Subscribe if you found this video helpful, and if there's any way we can pray for you, please add your prayer intentions below.